Long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow. It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki. As always, we got Jack McCurry rolling with us, but today we have a special guest. He is Mark Schofield, who has been on the show before. We got you in here because we wanted to talk Josh McDaniels with you. Obviously the Browns have made another head coaching change. They've made another front office change, and we think you are pretty darn qualified to discuss Josh McDaniels with your handlings with the Patriots over the years and as many hours of film as you have watched with that offense, as much time as you spent talking about him. So we thought you would be the absolute best bet to talk Josh McDaniels on our podcast. So we have quite a list of questions that we want to get through. Like I said earlier, hopefully we'll get you out in a reasonable amount of time, as that has not happened before when you've been on. But I guess the first thing is Jimmy Haslam spoke today to the media, and he laid out his top attributes for a head coach. And I kind of want to go through all these with you pertaining to Josh McDaniels. The attributes he laid out was, number 1, he's a strong leader. Number 2, he's smart. 3, good football acumen. 4, will work within the organization. It won't be not my way or the highway. And 5, he's a continuous learner. So if we want, let's just start with the strong leader one pertaining to Josh McDaniels. Do you believe what he's been able to do with that offense, that he is a strong leader?
And player to coach. He's a demanding teammate at times. He can be tough on offensive coordinators. We've seen that from time to time, in part because he's such a perfectionist. You have to be, a strong personality as well to sort of mesh with him and to sort of balance, the different egos in that Patriots locker room. You have to sort of check yourself in a certain extent because you're dealing with Bill Belichick as well. So I do think he checks off that strong leader box. I know we're going to get, in a minute to the sort of my way or the highway thing, and I'll probably have more to say on that trade in a second. But, I think this is sort of a double-edged sword with McDaniels, and I do hope for his sake, if he gets either the Cleveland gig or another head coaching gig, that he will have learned from some of his mistakes in the past and sort of apply those mistakes and those errors going forward. But I do think for the most part, he would check that strong leader box.
Obviously, being a smart guy, he's done a great job with that offense, and we'll kind of combine the smart thing with the good football acumen. Combining those two, I would think with the different things that the Patriots have done over the years with him on offense, that those two things are pretty well noticeable.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, if you're looking for a smart offensive mind to help your young quarterback, I think Josh McDaniels could be almost a perfect fit. And, I'm not just saying this because I'm an unabashed, unapologetic Patriots homer. I'm also a football guy, X's and O's scheme guy. And I would put McDaniels up there with some of the other offensive minds like a Kyle Shanahan or, a Sean McVay. Anybody you want to look at as a good play caller, a good play designer, a good, scheme mind. I think McDaniels checks that box. And part of what he does that is so important to help quarterbacks is what he does to give them information before the ball is snapped. If you watch a Patriots game, if you watch, the playoff game this weekend, for example, you will see them use so much motion, shifting, so many different personnel packages. And those all have, pluses and minuses to them. But I think what you look for is how much he gives Tom Brady information on what the defense is doing before the ball is snapped. Because if you line up with a fullback or a linebacker lined up as a fullback split wide like the Patriots have done with a Landon Roberts, and you see a cornerback over him, you know it's zone coverage, right? They're not going to put a cornerback in man coverage on a linebacker playing fullback. When you see all the motion and shift, and that all that does is give Tom Brady information before the ball is snapped. When you can go into the biggest drive of your season, Super Bowl 53, and realize that we have to attack their base personnel in the Los Angeles Rams, and the only way that we'll do that is if we're out in 22 personnel, and you run 22 personnel for one drive, and you run 3 straight plays of the same play because it's what's working, you're a smart football mind. And so I think Josh McDaniels is a very smart football mind, a very smart offensive mind. He does a ton to help his quarterbacks. It's a varied offense. A lot of people say, look, Tom Brady's just a system quarterback, but when you look at their playbook, when you look at what goes into their offense, they have so many different ways to beat you. They have so many different ways that they can beat you with a single play because of all the route conversions that go into it. It's a demanding offense to learn. That's why you see younger players sometimes struggle to get on the same page with Tom Brady. And that might be some of the reasons they're struggling this year offensively is because, on a given play, a receiver might have 3 different routes he could be running. If it's cover 2, he's running a post. If it's cover 3, he's running a corner. And if it's cover 4, he's running a hitch. And that's in their offense. And so, there are ways to sort of confuse players. And that's why the Bills, for example, have had a great deal of success against them recently because they spin their safety so well at the snap. It confuses not Tom Brady, but, if Brady reads it right, but the receiver reads it wrong, you're going to have a mistake. And so, it's a demanding offense to learn, but once you get it down, it's a very effective offense. Josh McDaniels does a great job with it. If you ask 100 Patriots fans, you'll probably get 5 or 6 that will have some quibbles with his play call from time to time. Sometimes he tries things a little bit too much. Sometimes he gets away from things like the screen game. But I think overall, he's a great football mind, comes from a great football family. Coaching football is in his blood. His father, obviously, a longtime high school coach in the Ohio area. And so, yeah, I think he would check those 2 boxes easily.
And I guess that you could kind of combine the last 2 because I think that when you talk about his time with the Denver Broncos and what he learned there and what he's been able to learn since he returned to New England, I guess it was kind of his way or the highway when he was in Denver.
Yeah.
And, based on all the reports and just what we've seen from that. But what do you see from him as a continuous learner from mistakes that he's made, whether it's calling a certain play in this situation, using a different formation, and then do you think that he would work well within an organization kind of using that same mindset?
Yeah, that's probably the $1 million question when it comes to McDaniels and what might be his 3rd go-round if you count what happened with Indianapolis, as a head coach. Because we know how the Denver situation started. You had that sort of video conference call. This was a story that Ted Sundquist is told from time to time about a video conference after McDaniels was hired, with Jay Cutler. Basically, McDaniels just sort of ripped into Cutler, basically saying, these are all the things that you do wrong. These are the things you need to fix. And as soon as that call ended, apparently Cutler turned to his agent and said, get me out of here. Like, that's a perfect example of, my way or the highway. Whether McDaniels has learned from that experience remains to be seen. But I think, human nature would tell you that a person that might be on his last shot as a head coach here, given how the Denver situation unfolded, given how things with Indianapolis unfolded, he's got to believe that, if he screws this one up, it might be it for him as a potential head coach. And so you would think he would apply some of those lessons going forward. One of the things that people often say year into year out about the Patriots, and in particular their offense, is, they figure it out. They figure it out as the season goes along. You look at their offense last year and, they want it to be the spread you out, quick passing game like they've been from year to year. But whether it was injuries or Gronkowski and his struggles or Brady getting older, it wasn't quite what they did best. And so they figured out by the end of the season that they were going to be best at a 21 personnel team that would run the ball and build off of that. And, if Josh McDaniels can beat you, running out of 21 personnel, he'll do it. If he can beat you throwing out of 22 personnel, he'll do it. He's not afraid to try new things, try to figure things out. I think if you watch this offense this year, you'll realize, like many have, that it's struggling. And so he's done different things, whether it's trick plays, whether it's, using a Landon Roberts, their linebacker, as a fullback more and more, even throwing him the ball last week for a touchdown. The bottom line is it seems that he has realized that, winning sometimes takes creativity, and it takes applying a different approach than you thought would be best. And sometimes it takes a while, and sometimes it takes some mistakes and some failures to learn that as a human being, not just as a football coach. And, if anything positive came out of that situation in Denver, it might be that. It might be Josh McDaniels learning that, look, I don't have all the answers. Sometimes the smarter you get is when you realize you don't have all the answers. And maybe he did learn that, and that would be a huge benefit to him when he does get a head coaching gig.
One of the reasons why people are tying McDaniels to the Browns is because of his fondness of Baker Mayfield. There was rumors leading up to the 2018 draft that the Patriots loved Mayfield, and there was also rumors that if the Browns had passed him at number 1, that New England was going to trade up to draft Mayfield and essentially be the heir to Tom Brady. Mark, talk about what you know about the Patriots' level of interest in Mayfield and what McDaniels thinks of him.
Yeah, Jack. I mean, there were, a number of stories that draft cycle that New England was interested in potentially getting up, to get a quarterback in that cycle. One name that was floated around was Rosen, but the interest between McDaniels and Mayfield was serious. And to the point where Mayfield, understandably so, didn't want to take the time to meet with the Patriots pre-draft because, let's face it, New England, I think that year was picking at 31. Baker Mayfield wasn't going to be there at 31. But McDaniels apparently, talked him into it and said, look, I like you a ton. The organization likes you. If there's a chance to get up and get you, we're going to do it. And that's why he took the meeting. And you can see why, somebody with McDaniels' mindset, with his offensive background, would like a guy like Baker Mayfield. He's a magnetic personality. I mean, you can see it down at the Senior Bowl when Mayfield was there, Combine, his pro days, all that stuff. People liked him a ton. People gravitate towards him. He's that leader type. And, maybe things didn't quite play out the way Browns fans would have liked it this year. But I do believe that McDaniels certainly has a fondness for him. And there's also sort of that athletic quarterback that create off of structure and in chaos element that is something that the Patriots as an organization seem to want in their post-Tom Brady world. When the Patriots, had a close game against Deshaun Watson a couple of seasons ago, Watson's rookie year, there were rumors after that's why, Belichick wanted to get a mobile quarterback as his next QB, because of a mobile quarterback and an athletic quarterback can bring to the table. And so I think that was also part of the interest that they had in Baker Mayfield, somebody that can sort of create off of structure, can create outside of the pocket, that can do things that Tom Brady can't, which stresses a defense in a myriad of ways. And so, I think when you look at philosophically where the Patriots want to go next, when you look at philosophically what Josh McDaniels likes to do and the different ways he likes to attack a defense, I think somebody with Baker Mayfield's skill set and trait base is something that's going to intrigue him a lot. And look, we know that the Browns have weapons in place. We know that perhaps the biggest competitive advantage you can have right now in this league is a young quarterback playing on his rookie deal. And I'm sure that is extremely attractive to Josh McDaniels. And I'm sure, look, coming home is extremely attractive to Josh McDaniels. And so I think to put all this stuff together, there's no surprise that McDaniels is perhaps a leading candidate or one of the leading candidates for this job.
You kind of answered my next question with that, but I'll also I'll rephrase it a little bit. After watching all the film on the Patriots and what you did draft work wise, watching Baker when you were on with us before the 2018 draft discussing quarterbacks, you had a lot to say and done a lot of homework on Baker Mayfield as well. You touched on some of the tools that he has that would fit with Josh McDaniels. What do you think schematically? Because it seems like every week the Patriots will do something different to win the game. They'll do whatever they need to do. Is there one thing or maybe a few things that Baker does really well that could be their bread and butter with the Josh McDaniels calling plays?
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the concepts where Baker was obviously successful in college, routes where he could attack the middle of the field with a decent amount of anticipation. You look at sort of the New England Patriots and what they've done historically. They love to attack the middle of the field, working off of play action. They love to, show that inside zone or sometimes a power move. If you watch the NFL 100, the final episode with the quarterbacks, Tom Brady actually talked about how they stole that in a way from Peyton Manning, where you pull the guard, show the linebackers a pulling guard, they're going to crash down, throw play action off of that with a crosser or a seam to the tight end. That's something that Baker Mayfield was doing in a sense at Oklahoma. They had a lot of like play action or mesh plays where you're pulling and throwing either to a slant or to the tight end on a crosser or a seam. That stuff that, Baker Mayfield's doing that he can step right into a Patriots offense and run. The Patriots offense, as complex as it is at times, you read through it, you scan through it, you'll see air raid elements like Y cross, like mesh and things like that. Things that obviously Baker Mayfield has a body of work running, has some familiarity with, obviously ran while he was at Oklahoma. They run these kinds of things, not a ton, but they do it, and it's in their playbook. And so, I'm skating through their three-man passing concepts right now, and I see a lot of stuff like, for example, their bullet concept where you've got a circle post, an angle route, and a crossing route. It's a 3-level read. That's stuff that Baker Mayfield can do on day one. That's stuff that he was doing back at Oklahoma. And so I think there's enough in this Patriots playbook, in this offense, and what Josh McDaniels likes to do schematically, that Baker Mayfield is going to feel completely comfortable with running. And then when you add in the element of a lot of the stuff that's in their playbook, but they don't really run, the rollout stuff, the sprint out stuff that Josh McDaniels doesn't get a chance to call every so often unless, it's preseason and Jarrett Stidham's in the game, or maybe they'll do it occasionally to move Brady in the pocket. That obviously becomes a bigger part of what you can do with a guy like Baker Mayfield, who you can move around a bit more. And so, I think there are certainly parts of what they do offensively that Baker Mayfield will have no trouble running should Josh McDaniels be his next coach.
The latest talk around Cleveland, now that DePodesta is overseeing the coaching search, is the utilization of analytics. And while it's been utilized in Cleveland over the last couple of years, it's a sense that they are going to find someone that mixes both football and analytics together. And I was just going to ask, we both wanted to know, how much does New England utilize analytics, and do you have any sense of how much McDaniels believes in analytics?
I think it's sort of one of those things that, people like to joke about Belichick, my snap face, he doesn't know, Facebook, Twitter, things like that. People watch the Belichick and Saban thing, and Belichick has that line where, we get on the plane and everybody's got their computers out after a loss and they're trying to figure it out. I'm like, guys, you won't find answers in there. We lost because we couldn't tackle, and people sort of see stuff like that and they think Belichick doesn't have sort of the analytics approach. But a lot of what they do is rooted in analytics. A lot of, especially when it comes to college scouting, they've got, athletic thresholds, whether it's size, whether it's hand size, whether it's 3-cone. You want to talk about analytics, like look at how they draft and the importance of the 3-cone, and that drill at the combine, because they firmly believe that translates to your ability to change direction, which translates into your ability to win one-on-one matchups, whether as a receiver or covering somebody as a corner. And so, I think this organization believes in it a lot more than they probably get credit for, a lot more than people realize. And I certainly think that, Josh McDaniels is a part of that as well. When you look at how what they do offensively is so rooted in getting matchups that are favorable to them and then winning as a result of that. I come back to that drive against the Rams in the Super Bowl where you've got to get them to stay in 22 personnel because that that's their least their base defense is their least effective defensive unit. Well, how do we get them to do that? You study that. You run the numbers on that. The reason why you know their base defense is the least effective is because you've done the homework and the legwork on that. And so analytics is a part of what they do. It's not talked about because people just think, oh, it's Belichick and it's Brady. But, there's a reason why Ernie Adams is part of their organization. That's a lot of what he does. And you want to look at analytics translated to wins on the field, look at the end of Super Bowl 49. They knew that shield slant combination was something that the Seahawks loved to do down in the goal line. They ran it a lot. And so they practiced against it. They were ready for it. And when push came to shove at the end of Super Bowl 49, the numbers pointed them into the right call, which was that 3 corners coverage and a play that Malcolm Butler had seen before in practice Friday before that game. And so this is an organization that top to down believes in it. They might not get that kind of credit for it, but they do believe in it. And I think McDaniels would fit into that kind of atmosphere.
And do you think McDaniels would have a problem working alongside someone like Paul DePodesta? He won't have to essentially report to him based on the way Jimmy Haslam spoke with the media today. But do you think he would have a problem working alongside DePodesta, or do you think there would be a situation where McDaniels will tell Haslam, I can't work with him if he's going to be looking over my shoulder at everything I do?
I mean, that's probably another sort of $1 million question, right? I mean, when you think about how Josh McDaniels is going to structure himself and approach this next head coaching gig. Will he have learned the flaws of the past and the mistakes of the past? And if he has, I think there will be no problem with them saying, look, the more minds we have working on these problems, the more sets of eyes we have looking at these situations and how best to improve this organization top down, the better, then I think he would have no problem with it. The sort of, given everything I just said about analytics and that kind of approach it is in New England, I don't think there'll be an issue with it. But I do wonder if, McDaniels has a sort of mindset that, look, I want football guys doing this stuff. And I'm not sure about, guys that have different backgrounds. But that's sort of a, glass half empty approach. I think McDaniels will be fine with it. And again, because it comes back to the idea that this might be his last shot. So he's got to get it right. So he'd be open to that. And if he can get information that helps him, if they can get players that help them win, if they can come up with different methods of whether it's scouting or pro player development or things like that will help them win, then he'll be all for it.
Yeah, there's a quote, talking about analytics today from Jimmy Haslam, and one of the things he said that if Baker is better out of certain formation or certain play, we are going to try and put him in a position where he can succeed. That's all analytics is. It's using data to help you make better decisions. But my kind of follow-up to that is, with the talent that Josh McDaniels has had this season, not having maybe that top wide receiver, not having Gronk this year, the offensive line not being what it normally is for New England. How good of a job do you feel Josh has done taking what talent he does have and maybe missing pieces here and there and putting them in the best position to win?
I think he's done an incredible job. And people might say, well, come on, he's got Tom Brady. Yeah, who's 42, who's 7 months younger than I am. Like, to get Tom Brady playing at even the level he is right now, even with Tom Brady being hurt, is a pretty impressive job. When you think about at one point they were down to their backup left tackle, their third string center, and a backup at right tackle, the fact that the offensive line has gelled the way it has, I think is an impressive job. Although obviously Dante Scarnecchia has a massive hand in that. When you think about the fact that Tom Brady began the year throwing to Josh Gordon and Antonio Brown, now he's thrown to Philip Dorsett and N'Keal Harry and Jacoby Myers, who's an undrafted rookie free agent. I mean, they have tried so many different combinations. They have tried so many different groups, whether it's the wide receivers, whether it's the offensive line, whether it's the tight ends. You go from having Rob Gronkowski, potentially the greatest tight end of all time, to Benjamin Watson, to Matt Lacoste, to Ryan Izzo. You have an offense that relies on a fullback, and you have a great one in James Devlin. Well, he goes down early. Then you turn to an international player and Jakob Johnson, and he has a couple of good games, and he goes down. And so now you turn to a backup linebacker to make him a fullback. He's done so many different things to get this offense in a position to be successful. And are they a good offense? No. Do they need to be a good offense for them to win a playoff game or make a playoff run with their defense? I don't think so. The fact that they're even, a serviceable offense, the fact that they can put up, 20 points or so on a Bills defense, which is a tough defense to face, speaks to the work that Josh McDaniels has done with this group to get the absolute best he can out of a group that is a really just sort of mishmash of different players at different spots.
In terms of a play caller, what would you say is McDaniels' biggest flaw?
Ask a Patriots fan that question, or ask 10 Patriots fans that question. You might get 10 different answers. From where I sit, I think there are times when he gets away from things that have worked, and it sometimes takes him a while to get back to them. I'm referring particularly to the screen game. New England is a very good screen team, but sort of in their stretch where they lost to, the Chiefs, and they had the Texans lost in some of those games, they really got away from the screen game. They got back to it in the past couple of weeks. They had a great running back screen against Miami. They got called back on a third down, but they came to it later in the game, and that went for a touchdown. So there are times when he gets away from things that have been working for him in the past, maybe because he's just trying to figure out new things. There are times when you might think he gets a little too cute, on, say, short yardage situations, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, you run jet sweep when you could just run right at somebody. So there are times when he gets dinged for that. A lot of people have had some flaws with how they've handled red zone situations the past couple of seasons. And part of that might be the fact that, look, with a diminished Rob Gronkowski last year and a lack of Rob Gronkowski this year, it's sort of much tougher to put the ball in the end zone when you're on the 5-yard line. It was a lot easier when you had a healthy 87. You could just split him out and throw a fade, split him out and throw a slant. I mean, he was going to win one-on-one matchups and almost made your job too easy down in the red zone. Now, McDaniels is struggling, trying to find a balance between, route concepts that are working for them down in the end zone, down in the red zone, or just being able to sort of just run smash mouth right at somebody. And maybe that gets to some of his being cute on short yardage situations, even in the open field. So I think those are sort of the main criticisms of him. There are times when people feel like he either sticks with the run too much or even gets away from the run too quickly. And that's sort of that balance you have to have with, calling plays and that, or a serviceable run pass ratio where you want to keep a defense honest but still do what's most effective for you. And all coaches have sort of struggles like that, but I really think it's sort of sometimes getting away from what really works, sometimes being a little bit too cute. I think those are probably his biggest flaws at times as a play caller.
Yeah, I think that kind of echoes a lot of what we saw this season with Freddie Kitchens. They got away from the run a lot early, getting very cute in short yardage situations. The red zone was a complete disaster, just a complete opposite of what Baker was during his rookie season in terms of being effective in the red zone. I think a lot of that has to do with Odell not being fully healthy all year round, and hopefully that's something that if McDaniels is hired, that he's able to fix and whatnot with the type of players that are here now, and everybody being fully healthy for sure. The $1 million question in all this is his first head coaching job was not really a success in Denver. And after that, he decided to go back to New England and be the offensive coordinator there. And I guess, what do you what can you take away, at least in your eyes? How have you seen him grown over his time, his first time with the Patriots to where he is now?
I think a lot of that is, sort of going through a humbling experience in a sense, and realizing that you don't quite know everything, and sometimes that can, send a person down one of two ways. You could sort of be a negative situation where you just stick yourself more into, what you believe in yourself, or you become even more set in your ways, or you can go the other direction and realize that I wasn't ready for this. I read a story recently, past couple of days, about, I forget what organization it was, but somebody was in to interview for a head coaching job, and like halfway through the interview, they just stopped the interviewers, whether it was the owner or the general manager, and they were like, I'm not ready to be an NFL head coach. I'm just not ready. Thanks for your time. And the person got up and left. And that person is an NFL head coach right now, and realized that I wasn't ready for this job. I wasn't ready to take on that responsibility. And Josh McDaniels might have, in a different way, come to that realization with the Denver experience, which is, I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't ready to handle everything that comes with being an NFL head coach. It's one thing when I've got my little piece of the pie here, my little portion of the kingdom. It's the offense, and I take care of that. And I don't care what they're doing defensively. I don't care what they're doing personnel-wise. I'll have a say on offensive stuff. But if they want to draft a defensive tackle in the first round, like, fine, whatever. Nudge me when we're thinking about tight ends. It's another thing when you're responsible for everything that happens. And so I think, in a way, Josh McDaniels and that whole sort of Denver experience, that humbling process maybe grounded him a bit to the point where he realized, I need to sort of go back, do what I do, and learn anew, in the sense that now, okay, I thought I knew what it meant to be a head coach. I thought I knew what I should be watching for and how Bill Belichick does it. I was completely wrong. Now I can sit back, do what I do, but still sort of absorb and watch and learn from how he does it. And now I have a better understanding for how he approaches, these things this way and these other things another way. It's similar to a quarterback, and sometimes we see young quarterbacks. Like last year, for example, Sam Darnold and Josh Allen both get hurt. They go down for a couple of weeks. They come back. They play much better because they've had a chance to try to be an NFL starter one way, their way. They get a chance to sit back, relax, and see how somebody else does it, and sort of reevaluate their own approach to being a starting quarterback in the NFL. You saw that similar with Daniel Jones this year. He gets hurt, gets to sort of rewatch how Eli Manning approaches being a quarterback from week to week. Then he comes back and he's a better quarterback for it. I think that might be the situation here with Josh McDaniels. It didn't work for him in Denver. He'll have a chance to sort of sit back, come back, be back with the Patriots, see how Belichick handles problems. Now he has a base of his own reference for how he might have handled that in Denver, and he could be a better person, better coach going forward. And I think you see that play out in, how they've handled the offense during this transition of Brady's career, how they've handled things differently. Whereas before, McDaniels might have just said, look, it's Tom Brady. We can throw it. We can spread it out. We can go up tempo. Now they realize they can't do that. And so they have to change their approach. He has to change his play calling. He has to sort of be the smarter, bigger person than perhaps he was before. And I think if he did sort of internalize and absorb those lessons from this entire process for him, he will eventually be a good head coach.
There were a couple memorable and maybe not so memorable player incidents with some of the players on Denver at the time. You talked about the Jay Cutler one earlier. The other one was Brandon Marshall. Yeah. He eventually got traded. This locker room in Cleveland has those big personality type guys, with guys like Odell, with guys like Jarvis Landry. Do you think that's – I know you had to try to handle Gronk for so many years. Do you think that's something he would be able to handle? You talk about learning from experiences, learning from the Brandon Marshall experience and being able to deal with guys like Odell and Jarvis.
I think so, but let's not forget, the thing that cures everything is winning, right? And so if they're 10-4, 10-6, 11-5 next year with him as their head coach, I mean, the personalities will be fine. It's really hard when you're 7-9 or 6-10. Then the personality conflicts can be more of an issue. But I think with McDaniels, look, he's had to balance Gronk. He's had to balance Tom Brady. Obviously, you're in Belichick's shadow. You're the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots, and the expectations are basically Super Bowl or bust every year, and you can have a huge role in how that unfolds. And so, handling all of that, handling some of the pressures that come with that, I think certainly has, put him in a situation to learn, and put him in a situation where now he understands that, look, I've got to be more open. I screwed up with Jay Cutler. I screwed up with Brandon Marshall. Maybe I screwed up with Tim Tebow, which was another sort of my way or the highway type of thing. Now I've got to realize that I don't have all the answers. I never did. Back then I thought I did. And again, if he has sort of taken those knocks to heart, then he will emerge a better head coach as a result of that. And I think that, look, at the end of the day, it does sort of come back to, can he do what he needs to do to put this team in a position to win football games? And, a potential relationship and how he handles Baker Mayfield is going to be the biggest part of that problem. And I do think that he's a good fit for Baker Mayfield. I think Mayfield would be a good fit in his offense, I do think that the interest between the Patriots and McDaniels and Baker pre-draft was real. And I think that would go a long way to sort of solving some of these other problems, such as personalities and my way or the highway and things like that, because they'll be a good football team and they'll win games.
Mark, what do you know about what really went down between McDaniels and the Colts? I mean, there's been numerous different reports. Albert Breer said it was something to do with the offseason workout program, that he wanted to control that. There was the rumor that, he wanted more power, that Ballard wasn't going to give up. Like, what really went down between those two sides?
Yeah, I wish I knew. I mean, I've heard a lot of different things. I've heard scenarios where, he was, like you said, wanted more control and Ballard wasn't going to give that up. I heard scenarios where he sort of got, cold feet about moving the family and didn't want to do it just yet. It's hard to sort of get into that aspect of what went down in Indy. I do think that it had to have been something serious, because given how the situation ended in Denver, it had to have been something that really put him in a situation where he was going to have to walk away from this, because he had to know, this was, going to be a potential thing that would blow back on him. I've also heard people say that, was he promised the Patriots job when Belichick retired? And from what I've been told, that was not the reason. There was no such promise or anything done by Kraft. I've heard people say that Brady stepped in. I've been told that wasn't a situation at all, that it was something between, McDaniels and the Indianapolis part of this deal, that there was nothing done by the Patriots to sort of give him cold feet or give him second thoughts or anything like that. As far as what exactly that was, I don't know, but it had to have been something serious.
All right, Mark, as we wrap up and get you out of here, we have one more question. And we're curious as to, when it comes to being a head coach, you have to put together a staff. There have been a lot of guys that have been poached from that Patriots staff recently. Brian Flores, Matt Patricia, as head coaches. Assuming Josh McDaniels is the next guy to be poached from that Patriots staff, who do you see McDaniels getting for his position coaches and maybe even an offensive and defensive coordinator role?
Yeah, I mean, people are trying to piece together who we might pull in, what his potential staff might look like. I think a lot of people assumed that when the Dolphins made the move to get rid of Chad O'Shea, part of the reason they were doing that was to, promote their quarterback coach, Shapinski, I think, to offensive coordinator to prevent McDaniels from bringing him along, because there's apparently a relationship between those two. Now, obviously, the Dolphins wanted a different direction. They bring back Chan Gailey, so maybe that could still happen. So that's one name that's sort of been linked to him. Obviously, look, Chad O'Shea, that might be another potential name, for a potential offensive coordinator. And I think, look, Chad O'Shea has done a pretty good job. He did a good job with that Miami Dolphins offense. I thought that offense got better, as the season went on, especially down the stretch. And so I think that might be another name to watch. When you look at, potentially some of the names that he's been linked to previously, there are some names out there as well. Another name would be John DeFilippo. I don't know if that would be a possibility or not, but he would be an interesting name. Defensively, it's hard to see, who he would bring or who he would pull in. A name that does sort of come to mind would be Gerard Mayo, the former linebacker who's now a linebackers coach with the Patriots. A lot of people thought that he was going to be their, defensive coordinator in, title, in effect, but not in title. So I thought he'd be the defensive play caller, but it turns out that Belichick's given that job title in a sense to his son, Steve. who's their safeties and secondaries coach, but is calling the defensive plays for him. And so it might be a situation where Mayo would be able to make the move to a defensive coordinator spot. A lot of people, when Mayo was calling plays in the preseason, liked what he was doing. So I do think players would like to play for him. Obviously, with a playing background of his own, players would identify with him and probably be able to have a good relationship with him. And so defensively, Gerard Mayo would be a name, I think, to keep in mind.
Just as an Ohio State fan, I just hope Brett Bielema does not make his way over here, just in that term.
Right. Yeah. I think Brett's more of a Belichick guy. I think those two have a good relationship, a good working relationship. So I don't think it'd be Brett. I do think Mayo might be a guy that you could see linked to potential McDaniels head coaching spot, wherever that is.
All right, Mark, we absolutely appreciate your time. I think we got under 45 minutes this time, which might be a record for
for us.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to go ahead and plug everything you got going on, where we could find you, where we could read you, where we could listen to you, because I know you do everything, so we can find you pretty much everywhere.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks again for having me on. It's always a blast to come on, and whenever you guys need me, I'm happy to come on back and talk whatever I can talk about. Find me on Twitter at Mark Schofield. Like I said, Inside the Pylon, Pro Football Weekly, Matt Waldman's Rookie Scouting Portfolio, Big Blue View, Bleeding Green Nation, and Pat's Pulpit, along with the QB Sco Show on Bleeding Green Radio and the Sco Show on the Pat's Pulpit Podcast Network.
All right, Mark, we absolutely appreciate it. That's going to be it for our podcast on this episode. As always, you can follow Jack on Twitter at JMcCurryClee. You can follow me on Twitter at Anthony Joki, Joki. Find a podcast on every platform that you can imagine. Be sure to check out our website, thedogland.com. We've had some great time over there writing. We've been covering the coaching search every single day over on the website. We're doing some big things over there, and we're excited that our readers have kind of responded and given us some nice page views. So we appreciate all you. As we get on out of here, most importantly, go Browns.